Mr. Scary Studios. Number one.
This takes place a few years ago. My parents were out of town visiting a relative. I was sick, so I decided to stay at home. I was about 17 at the time. It was an ordinary night. I was feeling tired, so I went to sleep at about 9:30 p.m. Suddenly, I was jolted awake by a loud knocking at my front door. I checked my phone and saw that it was about 3 a.m. Panic set in as the knocking sounded very frantic, yet systematic. It was a definite knock from a person and not just the wind or something. I crept down the hallway towards the door. Suddenly, the knocking stopped. I looked through the peephole. I prepared to see the worst, but there was nobody to be seen. I waited at my door for a few minutes, waiting to hear for more knocking, but none followed. I managed to convince myself that it was in fact the wind somehow, and made my way back to my bedroom. Then I heard the doorbell ring. I felt my heart sink, and I sort of just stood there in fear, and then it rang again. I looked through the peephole again. There was nobody there. By now I was creeped out, so I decided to call 911 as it was definitely a person doing this, and it was intentional. I crept over to my bedroom to get my phone to call the cops. To my surprise, there wasn't any knocking of any kind on my way back to the bedroom. I called 911 and told the operator my situation. As I hadn't been threatened or anything, the operator said that I would probably have to wait 45 minutes. I went to make sure I had locked the side door out of my house. Even though I was sure I had, on my way there, I passed the kitchen. In the corner of my eye, I saw a face peering through the window. I turned to face it in shock. He looked about as shocked as I was. We were just staring at each other in terror. I get goosebumps thinking of this part. While keeping the same facial expression, he lowered himself until he was out of view. I freaked out and hid in the closet. It was the only place I could think of what didn't have a window, until the cops arrived at about 5 a.m. They searched the property, which wasn't a lot, the neighbors, gardens, and the streets surrounding, but nobody was found. I even made cops search my house for him. I was that scared. I have never had anything happen like this ever again. So creepy guy, let's not meet.
Number two.
I've always wanted to post something here, but never had a story. But after reading someone else's story, it reminded me of something that happened to me when I was about 15 or 16. I wasn't freaked out at all at the time, but looking back, it's kind of a weird thing to happen. Also, not a very exciting story. I'm just low-key excited to have a story. That kind of relates to Let's Not Meet. So I was sitting on the couch in my living room with the sliding back door open, so the cats can go in and out as they please, and a scraggly man walks up the deck and casually into my house. I didn't think much of him because all of my mom's friends are musicians and some look a bit worn. So I said hello, thinking he was here to pick up a guitar or drop something off. He said hey and asked what I was doing, and I said just eating a sandwich and watching TV, what's up? And he started talking about how a car was parked too close to something and in the way, like mumbling about a car situation that didn't make sense, or enough sense for him to have to walk inside of my house without knocking to tell me. And I knew none of our cars were too close to anything because they were parked behind our house, where they always were. I said something like, "Oh, sorry, but those aren't my cars, so I can't move them." Then he said something like, "Never mind. It's okay, bye," and left. I didn't think much of it still and brushed it off as one of my mom's friends or a neighbor or something like that. I told my mom about it later and she was immediately freaked the hell out that some strange man just walked inside of our house. She said none of her friends were coming by and they would knock on the door if they were. I'm glad I was there to catch him off guard and not in the shower or sleeping because I don't think he was expecting to see someone as soon as he walked inside. I don't know what he was planning on doing in my house, but let's not meet again, strange man that walked into my house.
Number 3.
When I was 19, I came home from college to stay with my mom for the summer. She had recently divorced my stepfather and had moved from a house to a ground level apartment. One day I was sitting on the toilet peeing, if you wanted to know, and I saw a light coming through the vent on the floor. Looking closer, I saw 2 brown eyes staring up at me. I screamed, threw a towel on the vent, and ran to tell my mom and boyfriend what had happened. They initially thought I was kidding, until they realized I was generally freaked out. This particular complex had these weird locked cross-space type access points. The police found that the vents had been pried open, but they never found out who did it. I'm assuming a maintenance worker, needless to say. My mom moved out quickly. After that experience, I always, to this day, check vents, floors, or ceilings. This happened over 20 years ago, but still really creeps me out. Update. I've had a few days to reflect upon this post, you know. As creepy as the event was, I had another situation arise a few years ago, in 2007. I learned that prominent psychologist that I worked in Seattle in the early 90s committed suicide after it was discovered that he was filming his clients and employees in the bathroom of his office. He was arrested, lost his license, then offed himself. It turns out he hid his camera in one of those Airwick automatic air freshener units. The guy was a real ass. I quit the job because he was a lecherous, condescending ass. This was around 1993, and I wonder if there were tiny cameras back then, and if he was filming all the 20-something females whom worked for him. So disturbing how many awful people there are in the world.
Number 4.
When I was a teenager, I took a job at a local grocery store. My job description was basically to be the gopher. I fetched carts, bagged groceries, cleaned messes, set up displays, and the like. It wasn't a glamorous job, but I was young and it was money, but I digress. One day I was out in the lot in the middle of my shift fetching carts. There was only a couple, so I grabbed them and began walking back to the entrance of the store. I was passing the last few parking spaces before the crossing, the little roadway in front of the entrance, when I hear, "Hey, excuse me," coming from the left. I turn my head and see a man in the passenger seat of a big truck. I was facing the store, and the truck had pulled into the spot in the last row to the left of the store. In a way, I was nearest the passenger and the driver was closest to the front doors of the store. I replied yes, and he motioned me to come closer. I approached the truck carefully, so I was just close enough to see in. It has been years, so I can't give a very detailed description, but they were both broad and had beards, and were probably in their mid-30s. When I stopped, the passenger asked, "Does a woman named April work here?" There was a woman who worked there with that name, but she hasn't worked there that day. I was young, but not a total idiot, and didn't want to tell him yes. because anyone who knew her would just go in and ask her, right? I couldn't find words, but I guess my look told him yes. I was just kind of standing there muttering ums and uhs. He looks kind of exasperated with me and reaches down and pulls up his wallet and pulls out a $100 bill and a piece of paper and says, "Look, we know she works here. I will give you this now and another one as a reward later if you just call me the next time she comes into work. And don't mention to her or anyone about this." He sticks his arm out the window with the money and what I assume is his phone number. Now I'm scared. Two big men are offering a young looking girl $200 to tell them when another woman comes into work. Shady is an understatement. I hadn't worked there too long, and April was older, late 20s I think. But she was a coworker, and this was creepy. My loyalty was to her, not to weird strangers. I quickly went from scared to mad, and when I found my voice, I very sternly said, "Absolutely not." I ditched the carts I had and practically ran back into the store. I heard the truck start up and back out to leave on the side exit of the lot. When I got inside, I was shaking and breathless. My manager immediately asked me what was wrong. I relayed the story with my shaky voice, and he went outside to check, but they were long gone. We went up to the office and he called the police and then called April to tell her the story. I ended up having to write down my account of what happened and talk to a couple officers that showed up. I reviewed the surveillance tapes with my manager and boss, but the truck had parked out of range of the cameras. Like I said, shady. I was allowed to go home after that and had the next 2 days off. For about 2 weeks, April didn't work, and when I asked my manager if we had any idea about who those people were, he said he didn't know. When April did come back, she took me aside and thanked me. I just told her that I did what I thought was right, and that was that. She didn't tell me what was going on, and I didn't ask. I never heard anything more about it. I left that job a few months later for a better one, and still don't know the full story. I'm just glad April wasn't in that day, and her and the shady truck guys never had to meet.